Welcome back. Monday morning, the 10th of November, 20 minutes to 8 o'clock, JK on Morning Glory, on the day that Tim Davie has resigned as the Director General of the BBC. He's fallen on his sword. Has he, though? Sources, who'd have thought, right, that I had sources at the BBC, but I do. Sources have just told us that the government lent on Tim Davie to resign in order to keep Trump happy. Let's go straight to the former Conservative Party leader, Sir Iain Duncan Smith. A very good morning to you, Sir Iain. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, very good, thanks.
Sources told me, and these are genuinely true sources, I can't tell you why, but they are, that the government lent on Tim Davie to resign in order to keep Trump happy. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny you mention it, because that was the first thought I heard of when he resigned. I thought, hello, they've lent on him because they're very worried about upsetting Trump. Now, I think, in truth, the resignation was necessary. Also, the resignation of the head of news. But the bit that I keep asking the question of, what about the producer, the person that put this programme together and oversaw the ridiculous and biased cut that took place? We've not heard anything about that individual or individuals. What's happening to them? I mean, it's all very well for people even higher up the chain who may or may not have known at all anything of this. But at the level where programmes are produced, this is where the BBC is falling down. It's falling down because nobody is standing back from that programming and saying to themselves, really? Does this look biased to you? Does this look unfair? Does this bit of cutting or trimming, does that look like it's setting up some kind of false story? Who the hell asks those questions before it goes out? You know, newspapers do it the whole time. You cannot get an article in a newspaper without the lawyers checking it over. I mean, many times I've had delayed publications. People weren't sure about a fact and they want to check it. Quite right, absolutely what you have to do. It seems to me at times the BBC doesn't do that, in the sense that we need to get this out there. Let's make sure every fact is correct here, and the filming was correct. That's where the whole thing collapses. It's like a badly run business, awash with cash, that actually simply doesn't understand what good journalism is too often all about. Good journalism isn't about fancy stuff. It's about getting your facts right and making sure they can be stood up. That failed across the board in this particular case, has failed earlier on. You talked about the poor person who's been harangued now for having changed the wording on the statement that they were about to make from pregnant people to pregnant, or pregnant person to pregnant woman.
Martin Croxall.
Last time I looked at it, I wasn't aware that a single male, biological male, is possible having a child.
Well,
so
we live in a different world,
sense.
you and I, Sir Iain, honestly. But
Nonsense.
can I just say it in terms of what you said? I agree with you. However, if producers, commissioning editors, and I was in television long enough to know this, of course, on the floor, but don't ever let it be said that those above wouldn't be aware. And that is why so many people in this country have lost faith and believe it goes to the top. Samir Shah today, the chairman, is appearing before the Culture, Media and Sport Committee to apologise. But the fact of the matter is bosses in television networks will always say, oh, we didn't know about that. Patently, if you look back at what Davie has had to deal with, Hugh Edwards, Lineker, Wallace, Bob Villan, that Martin Croxall in the newsroom, J.K. Rowling, 2 stories a week corrected on Gaza. You would have to look at that if you're an ordinary everyday person and go, this comes from the top, they've got an ideology, they have a message. And I thought Richard Tice actually made a really good point. There's plenty of programmes on the BBC that are very popular. Traitors, Strictly, to name but a few. But if you look at where we are today, and you know this better than anybody, people get their news from all sorts of different ways. And I think that there is a majority, I believe this, of people in this country who now think it is wrong that a channel gets to perform in the same pool but with a great advantage of this money, awash, as you said, with cash. I suspect if the BBC had to play on a level playing field, they would very quickly tighten up all those aspects of journalism you're talking about, because nobody would subscribe.
Yeah, I proposed a while back that if you had a licence fee at all, and that's a debatable issue, but let's assume for a second there was some kind of licence fee, what's its purpose? Its purpose really should be about news and current affairs. All the rest that the BBC does is commercial. And by the way, they do sell that stuff too. So they get the licence fee and they get the cash from what they sell, which was paid for by the licence fee. So my question was really, why, therefore, do we even pay any money towards making of commercial programmes? Surely the licence fee could then be broken up amongst the terrestrial channels, all of them, so that they could spend their money, that money, on doing news and current affairs. That way you'd get a proper balance, because most of the news and current affairs is made at a loss. So for terrestrial channels, it's very important they get that. The rest is all commercial.
Yep.
So a large chunk of what they do could be out in the commercial market. They make good commercial programs. You know, you just named a couple of them. You know, they do very good period dramas. All that sort of stuff gets sold and is of good value. The news and current affairs bit is the bit where this all goes wrong, where they get an advantage because they don't have to advertise. And in down times in the economy, channels, you know, like ITV and yourself and others, they have to advertise, and that is very difficult. And so I would say just let that one be. If you're going to pay anything at all, you pay it towards the functioning of news and current affairs. The rest, frankly, which would diminish the money that gets from the taxpayer, as it were, to a much smaller degree.
And I mean, that's the point about news. Sky, 36 years. Your news output cannot be sponsored. It cannot, you know, it is to be a level playing field. But my argument about those programmes that are good is, if I want to watch Traitors or Strictly, if I want to watch it, I just believe that they are at... And I think if you step back, you go, so you're at this massive advantage where the money comes to you, or you get prosecuted if you're a person, and thus you've been allowed to almost get away with it for too long. Do you believe that the licence fee should change, Sir Iain?
Oh, dramatically. I've been arguing about that for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And also the numbers that are employed at the BBC. I don't mean to give the BBC a good kicking, but the reality is that most commercial programmes cannot afford the numbers of people making those programmes that the BBC does. Yeah. I was just looking at the Today programme the other day. How many people does it take to make the Today programme? They've got more presenters than anybody else. I was looking at LBC, the dear old Nick Ferrari, who runs his programme, like you do here, by himself for the whole of the morning, and he takes call-ins as well, which they don't do. But they take about 5 or 6 people to present that programme. And my question is why, when every other commercial channel does it with 1 or 2 people regularly on that all morning? And that's the bit that really gets me, is that there's this sort of sense that, well, it doesn't really matter, we can do it this way because we've got the money. No commercial programme would do that, paying people huge sums of money to do maybe 1 day, 2 days a week on a particular channel broadcasting. The same goes with back office staff. So my question really is, that you've raised, which is quite right, is there therefore institutional bias at times? Yeah. On an institution as large as this, as well financed as this, it's almost certain that there will be bias. Because what happens is there's a kind of me and you mentality that breaks out. Yes. We know best. We know what impartiality looks like. And nobody really checks that properly. So all the stuff to do with the trans issues and everything else was unbelievably and unfairly biased. People really couldn't get much of a hearing if they didn't agree with it. And eventually the tide broke on that one, and they've had to backtrack like mad. The same goes with foreign correspondents doing stuff, giving opinions endlessly rather than giving facts. And that should be where they would restrict it. No other organisation would do that. So I think the main thing to do is to say, look, there's one other issue too that happens. Lots of papers are in competition, and they have journalists that have to chase these stories, write them up, check them with lawyers, everything else. When they put them out there, the BBC is able to go and plunder those published stories, and they put them up on their website with no attribution at all as to where that came from, which paper, which journalist did it. So, you know, they get away with that, and therefore had a free-to-use website, which is fine, but no other newspaper can do that anymore because they need the revenue. So this is where the competition becomes unfair. And I think to that degree, even if you didn't have any ideological position on it, the reality is it is now a very unfair position in a very competitive media world. The UK is falling behind in that competition because commercial companies cannot compete with the big giants in America because for them, they've always got the BBC sitting on their shoulder. Completely agree with everything you've said. Sir Iain Duncan Smith, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much. As your former Conservative Party leader, making the point very, very properly that the BBC has an advantage in a different landscape. The world has changed and many of us feel, yes, there's plenty of good programmes, but the news output is biased. There is not the impartiality that we would believe a state broadcaster should have, and times should change.